equally funny and perhaps cruel internet meme recently that said, "Isn't it curious that we spend the first 2 years of our kids' lives trying to teach them to talk and the next 10 or 15 wishing they would just shut up?" I think that's a little beyond the pale. I think that one of the issues, though, is that we have around speaking versus listening is that we invest a huge amount of time in teaching our kids how to speak, perhaps not quite so much time teaching them how to listen effectively. What I want to put to you today is that the art of teaching kids to listen is not about sitting them down and saying, "This is how you listen." It's about the modelling of the listening we do. And it's about whether we can show that we are truly present when we're listening to our students, such that they can pick up the skills of what it takes to be a great listener. It's hard in schools. It's really tricky because you're so busy. You've got a lot of things to do, and what we want to do is to make sure that you're not distracted by all of those things, all of that stuff that's going on around you, such that you're not able to be really present when a young person has something important to tell you. A fabulous book that I want to recommend to you is by a really clever person called Oscar Trimboli. He wrote a book called Deep Listening, Impact Beyond Words. There's a part of this little book, and it doesn't take long to get through this one, by the way. There's a part of this book that I think underlines one of the challenges that we have as teachers to really model effective listening for our young people. And Oscar describes 4 different types of listener that are all equally unproductive when it comes to listening. The first one he speaks to is the notion of a lost listener. This is the listener that's so caught up in their own stuff, so caught up in the activity of their own lives that it's quite clear that they're distracted and they're not really listening. They've got something else going on and they're sort of nodding and giving the odd aha, but you can just tell that they're not really present in that moment. The second type of unproductive listener that Oscar talks about is the interrupting listener. The listener that is so determined to finish the speaker's sentences and to demonstrate their cleverness at understanding that they're not really taking in what the person is wanting to tell you. Oscar says in his book that while we tell people a lot that we just want someone to listen, the truth is we really just want to be heard. Sometimes our kids don't want us to solve their problems. They just want to know that they're heard. And that leads us to the third type of listener, which is the shrewd listener. I thought this was a really interesting description. The shrewd listener is the one that sits there nodding, but they're quite clearly not listening to what's really going on for that person. They're planning and scheming what the solutions are. They're looking to take on the message or take on the story or take on the responsibility of the problem that's being communicated to them. And they're thinking of their brilliant Machiavellian plan for what they're going to do, when all this person really wants is for you to understand what the situation is like for them. They'd like you to help them come up with the solution rather than hit them with the solution yourself as soon as you've heard what they've got to say. And that brings us to the fourth kind of unproductive listener, which is the dramatic listener. The listener who gets so caught up in the emotion of the story that it's like they're watching a dramatic movie and they're following and they're riding all of the plot turns and twists with equal emotion as the person that's speaking, and not actually showing that the story is about the person who's delivering, not the person who's receiving. So we don't want to get caught too much up in the emotion of what that person's saying. And I think that if we can understand that those 4 unproductive types of listener can be manifested in all of us at some stage in a busy school, then we can start to get focused on what does a productive listener look like. What does it look like and what does it feel like and what does it sound like to be in a conversation with a young person in which you are truly present? Can you show empathy rather than sympathy? Can you show that you understand? Can you ask further questions? Can you seek clarification? Can you actively acknowledge that certain situations are important to that person that perhaps wouldn't be completely understandable or important to you? Can you be truly present? And when we demonstrate for our students the way that we can be truly present in a conversation, we do more for teaching them how to listen than any particular lesson might ever achieve.